Jimmy Smith breakdown for UFC 240. I didn't film anything this week. That's why there was no pre 240 picks or anything like that or breakdowns because I wasn't in town and I ended up doing a lot of stuff for SiriusXM Monday, Thursday, Friday, and then last night till 3 in the morning doing the post-fight show. So I was just working a lot and I wasn't around to film anything. So just to have a post-fight breakdown for this. The interesting thing about this card is that it wasn't that interesting. A lot of fans were disappointed that this was a pay-per-view card. This would have been a good fight night card. There's really one fight that everyone was interested in, Max Holloway versus Frankie Edgar. Other than that, they ended up being decent fights. But for pay-per-view, a lot of people want more. The one storyline that kind of jumped off the screen was Cyborg, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but there weren't any dramatic upsets. There weren't any performances where you go, wow, the following Monday and go crazy about it. It was a so-so card, and it delivered so-so in terms of everything pretty much went as expected. Let's start at the bottom, and I can break them down one at a time. And it was Jacco versus Barrio. Barrio was one of those guys he was the one coming forward, but Jacco had the bigger toolkit. Jacco was a UFC veteran. He had been in there longer, training with top team. There was just more he could do. Barrio kept coming forward, kept trying to stalk him down, but Jacco threw good combinations, good left hook, good footwork, and was always playing the matador to the bull. You kind of expect that with a more veteran guy. This looked like a seasoned guy in Jacco, taking on a guy who's talented, might have a future, but is just getting started, just learning those skills, just a little bit behind. And that's what I mean about this card delivering. That's kind of what was expected to happen. The veteran guy could do more than the guy just coming in. And that's what it looked like. And he won a split decision. I thought it should have been a unanimous. I thought Jacco won pretty handily. But that was the start of the card, where we're starting to see, okay, this is kind of how it's going to go, kind of what we expected to happen happened. Sarukyan versus Olivier Mercier. Mercier was a guy that I had high hopes for a little while ago as an up-and-comer. Went over Drew Dober, Evan Dunham as well. Setbacks against Hernandez, against Gilbert Burns, who's, I think, an underrated 55er and moving up to 70 now. But I thought he might get back on track with this one. Sarukyan, in his UFC debut, showed some good wrestling, some good scrambles, good energy, didn't run out of gas, kept high octane, just got outworked a little bit in his UFC debut. But Mercier, I thought if he could stop the takedown, he could win this fight, and he couldn't stop the takedown. Close fight. It was 29-28 on every judge's scorecard, but clearly lost 2 out of 3 rounds. Don't know where he goes from here. That's 3 in a row against mid-range guys you got to beat if you want to be elite. Especially Sarukyan has probably the worst name of the guys he beat. Burns is good. Hernandez is an up-and-comer, of course, who just recently got back on track in a bad way, but another up-and-comer. So that's a tough one. Sarukyan has shown great wrestling, good top control. Will that get him to the elite of the sport? I don't know. But another one that went to decision, fight not a lot of people expected a lot out of, and didn't deliver that much. Jeff Neal versus Nico Price. Nico Price, funky, unorthodox, long reach, heavy-handed, but funky. Funky and unpredictable. You never know how he's going to finish a fight. Very heavy-handed. The fight I called when he fought in Boise, Idaho, he got a knockout from the bottom with a hammer fist. So he can knock you out from anywhere. Jeff Neal is one of those guys who's good footwork. I like the bounce in his step. I like the angles he was cutting. But real technical, hands high, good combinations. A much more traditional tactical striker than Nico Price, who can be kind of a wild man. So that was, to me, the contrast in this fight. Can Nico Price land that big shot that you didn't see? And could Jeff Neal outbox him with his more clinical, tactical style? We saw a little bit of both. Price landed some really good punches and had Neal hurt, and a bunch of funky things happened. Jeff Neal got back into it with his technique, but Price didn't have the ability to follow up when he had Neal hurt any of those times. And their transitions on the ground were, as a jiu-jitsu guy, all over the place. They were just doing all kinds of funky stuff, and then Price would let Neal on top. He gets full mount and all this craziness where no one could settle the fight down. And that's the kind of fight that favors Nico Price. When Jeff Neal did settle him down, get him on his back, get on top, hit him with some ground and pound, he was able to finish the fight. So it was about Jeff Neal. It was almost like hitting a fly in the air. You just can't do that. Got to wait for him to settle down and sit for a sec. Then you can nail it. And that's what it seemed like with Jeff Neal. He's dealing with an explosive, funky guy with weird range and a crazy style. Settle it down a little bit. Slow it down. Get him on the ground. Leech some of that energy out of him. Then you can finish him. Trying to catch Nico Price on the feet, he can catch you just as easily. and from an angle you weren't really prepared for. So it was probably the fight of the main card for me, probably just in that it was a bit all over the place. And you can say the Holloway Edgar fight was great, but it went a little more as expected. I'll get into that in a minute. This was, you didn't know which way it was going to go, and then Neal ends up winning by TKO. Good stuff for him. We'll see where he goes at 170. Chris Cyborg versus Felicia Spencer. Now, when I say this was the only storyline that really jumped off the screen to me was, would Cyborg have a dominant wipe Spencer out performance that would say, I'm here, I want to fight with Amanda Nunes, and really put her in a great position to negotiate with UFC? Spencer took a ton of damage in this fight. Cyborg hit her with everything but the kitchen sink. Spencer refused to go down and didn't even look that bruised up. I could not believe it. Managed to cut Cyborg, bruise her up, got her a little bit bloody. Cyborg walked into a ton of punches. A ton of punches. Now, Spencer's not a knockout puncher, doesn't hit necessarily that hard, and Cyborg was able to deal with them pretty well, but two things really leapt out to me. Cyborg landed a bunch of shots, a lot of combinations that maybe previously would have knocked somebody out. We'd never seen anybody take that many punches from Cyborg and still be there. A lot of people are saying Felicia Spencer's a natural 145er, and unfortunately, with the nature of the division, Cyborg has had to take on a lot of puffed-up 135ers who just weren't physically big enough to hang with her. Spencer was pretty big. I accept that completely. You just wonder if, after the first knockout loss of her career, she's, 21-2 now, so 23 professional fights, not counting kickboxing or anything else she did, that she might be slowing down a little bit. You would expect most fighters at this stage in their career to slow down a little bit, that she doesn't have necessarily the snap on her punches. That's one storyline, that Cyborg hit her with a kitchen sink and wasn't able to get her out of there. But she was dominant. It was an absolute wipeout for Cyborg, and so a lot of people are kind of, oh man, she didn't look as good, but she still wiped out Spencer, and all you can do is wipe out the fighter in front of you. The problem is that as I was watching it, and a lot of people I was talking to, fans and stuff, thought about, would she beat Amanda Nunes fighting this way? No, she won't. She won't. To discuss with Dan Hardy last night when we were on Sirius Radio, I asked him that question. I said, does the Cyborg we saw tonight beat Amanda Nunes? He goes, no, she doesn't. And when you see her walk into all those punches, Nunes, that's what she did against Nunes. She's walked into a lot of punches, but Nunes could put her down and did. So I was thinking maybe in this fight we'd see, if not a more defensive Cyborg, a slicker Cyborg. A Cyborg with her hands up, moving her head a little bit more to get inside. Cyborg has always been willing to walk through hell to land the knockout shot. She's always had confidence in her ability to walk through punches to land my knockout. That'll work against everybody but Amanda Nunes. So the idea that her team didn't clean up these issues against Spencer, who wasn't going to knock her out, by the way. So you can basically test that defense. Okay, in this fight, you're going to move your head a lot. You're going to work on having your hands up because you're not taking on the greatest striker in the world. You can kind of mess with the game a little bit. And she didn't. It was the same old Cyborg walking through punches to land big punches. But there were two sides to that. Number one, she walked into a lot of shots. And number two, she landed a lot of shots that couldn't take her opponent out. And so I thought that was an interesting contrast there. Like, yeah, she won. Yeah, she was dominant. Man, she took a lot of punches. And when she landed shots, they didn't have the effect we've seen them have in previous fights. Now, it could be she's just taking on a bigger fighter. Certainly possible. A lot of people pointed out, in Strikeforce they weren't testing for steroids, and she got popped in Strikeforce and all those things. Okay, that's certainly a possibility, but we've seen her do serious damage in the UFC where she's been tested a lot. So I wouldn't necessarily put it down to that. I would certainly put it down to maybe Spencer has a great chin and she's just a naturally big 145er. Either way, a dominant performance by Cyborg, but not the kind of performance that's going to strike fear into the heart of Amanda Nunes or make skeptical fans think, man, she can knock her out this time. So we'll see. Does she stay with UFC? I don't know. My leaning would be yes, simply because if she goes to Bellator, I think she beats Julia Budd, and then what? She has the same problem she's had in the UFC, which is it's hard to build a division around Cyborg. Cyborg's really good at highlighting how bad your division is. If you're Scott Coker, you want to spend a bunch of money on Cyborg, and you don't have a pay-per-view revenue stream to bring her in and have her beat Julia Budd, maybe be your champion, and then beat everybody else you have at 145. That's always been the rub for Cyborg, is it's Cyborg and everybody else at 145. Until Amanda Nunes came along, of course. So that's the one big fight that's left, is Amanda Nunes. That's only in the UFC. She might have some options outside of the UFC, but we'll see what she chooses to, where she chooses to go. But, a dominant performance, but question marks on both sides. So the main event, Max Holloway versus Frankie Edgar. Great performance by Max Holloway. Can't take anything away from him. Frankie Edgar, guts, heart. It was a Frankie Edgar type fight. Frankie Edgar looked like Frankie Edgar. And I don't mean that as an insult. What I mean is there wasn't anything I saw where I went, man, he's really been working on this thing. It looked like Frankie Edgar. And in that regard, Max Holloway has 12 years of tape in the UFC on Frankie Edgar, who's prepared for everything he did. It was a Frankie Edgar takedown, a little bit of angling, tight combinations. Well, Holloway was ready for all that stuff. And so he picked him apart. I knew at the end of round 2, this is how this fight's going to go. In order for Frankie Edgar to win, in the first 2 rounds, he had to get inside, use his in-tight combinations. He got short arms, but he throws good combinations. Or get the takedown. If he can do one, if not both of those things in the first 2 rounds, he can bank some rounds, and then Frankie Edgar's off to the races. None of those things happened. He wasn't able to get inside for any real length of time. He got in and out occasionally. He wasn't able to get in clean. He wasn't able to get out clean. Meaning Holloway always had a jab or the uppercut waiting for him, so he couldn't get in untouched. And then he couldn't get in, land a combination, get out without getting hit. So he got in a couple times. A, couldn't stay there and do any clinch work or in-tight boxing. And B, every time he went in, he got hit. Every time he went out, he got hit. So Max Holloway controlled the striking, controlled the range, long arms, funky, baiting him in, kind of the Diaz type style. And Frankie didn't have much of an answer for it. Yeah, he stayed in the fight. Holloway had him hurt a couple times. I think the takedown he got was because Max Holloway had hurt him, and it was kind of a desperation takedown. But he had him in desperation mode a couple times. Had to have him clinch. That interview at the end was, I wanted to go 5 rounds. He was trying to finish him. He was hitting him hard. Frankie is just a tough dude and wasn't going to go down like that, and is always tough and made the best of it. So the question marks coming out of this fight is, A, does Edgar go down to 135, or is he a gatekeeper at 45? I just don't see him getting another title shot at 145 without a run of wins that he can't really go on at 37. Does he have enough time to go on the run he would need to get back at 45? No. With all those murderers, no. I don't believe that. It's a tough division. I don't see him winning the 3 or 4. Remember, to get another one, he's got to really convince the fans that he could win. You got to show me something. I don't see him doing that at 37. We saw the Frankie Edgar we've seen for 12 years last night. Good, but couldn't overcome that hump. Couldn't get past a very prime, tough Max Holloway. So that's the question. Does he go down to 35, or is he a gatekeeper at 45, or does he call it a career? According to the interview at the end, he doesn't call it a career. He still has some fights left in him. Does he just look for some big money fights at 45 maybe? Like Uriah Faber, some fun stuff is what I mean, but not contender fights. Or does he go down to 35 and make a run there? We'll see. I'll probably goes down to 35 and makes a run there if I had to guess, simply because he's the kind of guy who's not content to be a gatekeeper and just have fun fights, whatever. Kind of like Jose Aldo's doing now, where he's, not quite gatekeeper, maybe call him a gatekeeper, but, some fun fights that aren't for a belt or aren't against contenders, and he can make some money. I know Jose Aldo just fought Volkanovski, but that idea that Jose Aldo can make money at 45, have some really fun, entertaining 3-round fights, and make a career at the end. Frankie Edgar could do that at 45. But in order to be a contender and go for a belt, it's got to go to 35, and we'll see if he does that. Probably. Max Holloway. Question coming out of this is him or Jose Aldo, number 1 of all time. Right now, I'd still say Jose Aldo. And maybe it's because I'm an old fan, and I remember Jose Aldo in his prime and how good that guy looked and how versatile he was and how he destroyed guys. Max Holloway, if he wins a couple more of these, though, he might move past Jose Aldo. Because right now, it's Max Holloway or Jose Aldo. And one thing I hate, and I know it's social media, Jose Aldo is number 1, there's no argument. Max Holloway is number 1, there's no argument. Yes, there's an argument. The argument is Max Holloway or Jose Aldo. We can sit here and debate it all day. It's a matter of opinion. It's a few stats one way or the other. Okay? So I hate that there's no argument. Yeah, there's an argument. Max Holloway and Jose Aldo are the 2 greatest featherweights of all time, in my opinion. So, of course, there's going to be an argument. Right now, I have Jose Aldo ahead, but Max Holloway could certainly get there. And would Max Holloway be content to just be the greatest featherweight of all time, or would he want to move up again? I think that's a little bit down the road. I think he wants to win a couple more. Of course, Volkanovski coming up, and then Zabit Magomedsharipov. Those are both great fights. If he dominates both of those, might go past Jose Aldo. It's a different generation of fighter now. So it's kind of apples and oranges, and we'll see. But those are the 2 questions. What does Frankie Edgar do with his career from here on out? Max Holloway, one of the greatest or the greatest. But he still has time to add to that legacy. Right now, I'd still say Jose Aldo, but hey, man, Max Holloway looked absolutely fantastic. Great performance by him. So we'll see what happens with both those guys. But Frankie Edgar, hats off to him. As tough as he could be, always, dude is Jersey tough. And Max Holloway, right now, clearly number one in the world at 145 pounds, one of the pound-for-pound greats. One thing I got to ask about, because when I study a fight, because I was on SiriusXM radio, so I mute the fight so I can really study, and then I have to do sound checks and stuff with my headset to make sure that everything's working. That's the only time I hear commentary. Apparently, a lot of people are really critical of Joe Rogan's commentary. I read some stuff this morning about it. I didn't hear it because I have it on mute because I'm studying and then I'm doing audio checks and stuff. So I only hear little snippets of it. So I'd like to hear in the comment section what the deal was and what you guys think of it, because I have no idea. I haven't rewatched it or anything. But I woke up this morning, it's like, or actually during the fight, I got some tweets about people were critical of Joe Rogan, what he was saying in the commentary. Of course, we're friends, but I want to know what's going on, and I haven't been able to hear it yet. So in the comment section, let me know what you guys are thinking. Give it a subscribe and a like if you like. Thank you.